Alongside 3 new leaders arriving in Civilization 6 today as part of the Leader Pass DLC, the Great Commanders release, Civilization 6 also received something it hasn't in a long time. A real, get this, game patch update. A free update to Civilization 6 on Steam and Mac for all users. And in this video, we're going to dive into all of the changes that have come out in Civilization 6 today, and I think we'll start with those patch notes. Item number 1 on our agenda is that they addressed a number of reported crash and stability issues. If these issues affect you, this will be a godsend. If not, you probably don't care, so I won't dwell on it much more. The second item on the list is that the AI will no longer bias towards science to the detriment of its other guilds. So it's no longer just going to be like, science is my only thing, which was occasionally causing instances of the AI to go bankrupt, to disband its units for all sorts of madness, really. That should see more stability in gameplay. Thirdly, they addressed an issue reported by some players that the correct music was sometimes blocked from playing during leader pass leader scenes. This is more of a sidelined issue, hasn't necessarily been a game-breaking thing, no. However, the next item on the agenda does actually address an in-game civ and will likely provide some gameplay change, although relatively limited. Canada's last best West ability now correctly gives a bonus of +2 production instead of +1 production for snow mines and tundra hills. So you will now correctly get the benefits that you were promised in Civilization 6 when you're playing as Canada. Moving along to the next item on their patch list agenda for today's update, we see that they've corrected an issue that some players reported with the culture industry policy card, here it is on screen, that was causing production of specialty districts to appear to take 999 plus turns to complete in Dramatic Ages game mode. A little bit of a niche issue, but it's nice to see that they're across things large and small. We'll of course get to the more significant updates when we address the leaders, but finally on the list you can see that they've changed Saladin's icon image to match those of other leaders. Who's a big boy now? And finally they made some minor test tweaks and applied polish to previously released Leader Pass Great Negotiators pack. That's the 3 leaders that we saw released last month as part of this new Leader Pass system, very similar to, of course, the new Frontier Pass, where we receive new content every month. Speaking of which, it's time now to take a look at the new leaders, 3 of them, who have graced Civilization 6 today. A quick note for the commenters below, this patch is not available on console, at least not yet. It's available on iOS and Mac, as well as, of course, PC Steam. Now let's move in, and I'm going to overlay the leaders like this throughout each one. Firstly, we have Tokugawa, an alternate leader for Japan, a brilliant military and peacetime strategist. If you're playing with Rise and Fall or Gathering Storm enabled, you will receive the following. International trade routes get a -25% yield and tourism. But domestic trade routes will provide +1 culture, +1 science, and +2 gold for every specialty district at its destination. Furthermore, cities within 6 tiles of Japan's capital are 100% loyal after researching flight, receive +1 tourism for every district as well. If you're playing without the DLC, you can see it's slightly different. I'll display that on screen for you. Essentially, it's around that latter part, instead receiving +4 amenities as opposed to the loyalty-based feature, which of course won't be in your game. Tokugawa looks like an interesting pick and an alternate leader for Japan. We'll have to wait and see, of course, how Tokugawa hits the ground running. Obviously, a big focus here on domestic trade and isolationism, something Japan, of course, historically very famous for. Now let's move into our second leader of the bunch. A new leader for Persia, in fact. This is Nader Shah. Nader Shah brings 2 unique leader abilities, thankfully this time not split between fragmented different versions of the game, depending on when and how you bought your DLC. Nader Shah is a new leader for Persia that brings +5 combat strength against full health units, fitting very well with the history Nader Shah, by the way, emerged as an 18th century leader to re-establish Persia, Iran, his rise brutal but decisive, and that is of course played through with the +5 combat strength. Useful arguably only on first strike, of course, only playing out against full health units, but there's plenty of opportunities to deliver blows like that. The second thing that Nader Shah brings to the picture after I get rid of his picture off the screen is +2 faith and +3 gold on domestic trade routes in cities not founded by you. Important to note, of course, these are domestic trade routes, so it's only applying to trade routes that are running from one city to another within a nation. And the other caveat here is that, of course, it's cities not founded by us. So every city will qualify, except for those ones that we place down ourselves. Perhaps we capture them, perhaps it's domestic routes elsewhere, but either way, we're receiving +2 faith and +3 gold on our domestic trade routes. Of course, this combines to build a fairly aggressive stance for Persia, laying on top of its immortal and other things that it already brings to the game. It'll be an interesting one to see how it plays out. Last but not least, though, I've saved the most magnificent for the end. Here we have an alternate leader for the Ottoman Empire. And it's nice to see you again, Suleiman the Magnificent. Suleiman the Magnificent is more unique than the rest in that it requires Gathering Storm to play, whereas the others, of course, require a hodgepodge of other DLC. Suleiman brings +15% science and culture when you're in a golden or heroic age, hence, of course, the need for the DLC, because it's entirely reliant on these ages. The +15% science and culture, of course, will be an incredibly powerful boost on top of already significant ages. There is a second ability that goes alongside this, though. +4 combat strength when you're not in a golden or heroic age against civilizations who are also not in a golden or heroic age. So if you're slumming along in a normie or dark age and your foe is as well, then you'll receive +4 combat strength, nearly as much as the +5 that we saw the Persians get just before against full health units. This one is arguably win more kind of situation in terms of science and culture, of course, building up your own game, but then also provides potential to sort of crab bucket and scrap against those who may be lingering behind, or at least those who aren't in golden or heroic ages, if you do happen to fall onto the back foot. Potentially allowing a little bit of versatility and adding, of course, another leader to the already built Ottoman roster. We now have 2 to choose from, and as you can see on screen and as you've been able to see throughout, the remainder of the Ottoman abilities of course remain the same. These are new leaders being added to Civilization 6, optional playable leaders that you can slot on top. So, with that out of the way, and everything discussed, coming not only in, of course, the paid expansion, free if you've got the Civ 6 Anthology, the Leaders Pass with the addition of 3 new great commanders, but also with that free patch update, which, while it provided some perhaps highly necessary stability improvements for many, arguably of course didn't impact the game that much, aside from some balance tweaks to a few leaders and that kind of thing. Thank you very much for joining me today in this lightning fast coverage of the Civilization 6 patch. I hope you enjoyed it. Please consider liking the video if you like this kind of coverage, and I'll see you next time.